Okay, welcome. For this lesson, what I want you to do is you're going to go ahead and take notes right onto this PowerPoint. This is slide 11 of the lesson one or unit one, lesson one PowerPoint. And it talks about who we are as humans. And so what we're talking about is what's called the hominids. And the hominids are kind of the original man. So what you want to do is take a couple moments and look up who Lucy is, and look up the other two questions that we have and kind of define those. That'll be something we do a lot this year, and it's something that we're going to do a lot in this PowerPoint. So as you're kind of going through it, you want to fill those questions out. The first major human or human species was known as the southern ape, and it came from Eastern Africa. That's where they believe humankind or mankind kind of started, was in the Eastern African region. And these are not a full human as we know it. It's more of a human-like species. And kind of the biggest difference of this initial species was that they were much shorter. They were completely covered in hair, and their brains weren't fully developed. And so their brains were about 500 centimeters compared to 1,400 today. And so their just brain development was much smaller, much more simpler. They were completely covered in hair, very animalistic-like, not humans like us today. And their weight was much smaller. They're about 50 to 120 pounds was kind of the average weight of them. Now, then we have what's known as the Homo erectus, and they're very different than the initial human species. And the fact that it's not what's known as upright walking human. The initial species was kind of a kind of bent over, not necessarily walked on two hands and 2 feet, but it wasn't a fully upright human being. And the Homo erectus is kind of that first fully upright human being, the walker that we know on the 2 feet. Their brain is much larger, and they're also a very tall existence. They started using and creating tools, and their kind of big addition to history was the creation of fire. I think there's a lot of correlation between the fact that they had fire to heat themselves and the lack of hair, which would then keep you warm. They were also able to communicate. The initial human groups didn't have the capability to communicate with each other. The Homo erectus started having, we saw mouth and jaw structure that we believe that allowed them to communicate with each other. They lived in very small communities and villages, but in general, they were a moving kind of species. And they started moving up from Eastern Africa to North Africa and up to Eurasia, the territory between Europe and Asia. So go ahead and answer this question and write down what type of climate do you feel that they would survive in and why. Next is we have Homo sapiens. Again, go ahead and look up the answer, find out what what sapien means, and figure out why you think this may or may not be us today. The Homo sapiens are most noted for their larger brain development. They're kind of the thinkers of the group, specifically their frontal lobe or the rational thought part starts to kind of develop. They were also able to speak, where we start to see a really development of their jaw and bone structure, allowing them to communicate with other people. They also start moving throughout the world as we know it. They start moving to Western Europe. You see a lot of development to Eastern Asia and North America. Specifically, we start to kind of see the growth of what's known as the Polynesian population that establishes itself in kind of Southeastern Asia area. This is kind of just a chart that shows you some of the different Neanderthal and initial groups. Okay, then we get to the Paleolithic period. And the Paleolithic period is known as the Old Stone Age and exists about 2.6 million years ago. And during the Paleolithic period, they're known and noted for just they're purely looking for food. That's what their existence was, is they were just in a constant search for food. They were what's known as nomadic hunters, and nomadic meaning they were moving and mobile, and they just kind of moved from area to area, just constantly looking for food. In general, the society was very equal. Everybody kind of equal social standing and equal equivalent inside of society. And so the question I had is, why do you think there was equality at this point in time in history? What did they do that maybe made them equal with each other? There were very, very little settlements in the Paleolithic period, but there was one. And so go ahead and look up the Jomon Society, and you want to answer that question about what was the Jomon Society. Okay, next is we get the Neanderthal people. And the Neanderthal come from the Neander Valley in Germany. Germany is a country in Europe. And they're known as the Homo neanderthalensis. We know a lot about this group because of the burial in the Shenander cave. And again, if you get a chance to look that up, it's fascinating, just kind of the burial procedures. I mean, this is where we start to see kind of the basis or the introduction of a religion, along with kind of the idea of a burial practice of a species. They also continue to start developing. They are known for their great development of spears, knives, and slings. They used that mainly to start hunting, but they also started to do some fishing, and they're kind of the first group to really start fishing for food. There was some art of that time period. Early humans don't have a lot of art development, mainly because they're spending most of their time just surviving, just trying to feed themselves, so they don't have a lot of that time to sit and do art and artistic things. But will you go ahead and look up the Venus figurines and kind of answer these questions on this slide, please? Next, we run into the Neolithic period, and the Neolithic period is known as the New Stone Age. And there's a huge difference between the two Stone Ages. Specifically, the Neolithic has much better tools, but they're mainly known for farming. They decide that it's more beneficial to stay where we are and grow food and live off the food around us in the area around us. Now, because of this, because they were settling in one area and staying one area, they tended to settle in warmer areas with warmer climates. There's obvious reasons for that. Women were specifically the ones who worked out in the fields and were the specific farmers. Men were still the hunters and gatherers, where women kind of tended to the gardens and stayed close to home. There was a change in roles. And so the question I want to ask is, why do you think there was a change in roles? So go ahead and answer that question. The big part and the big thing we need to understand about the Neolithic period is because they started doing agriculture, because they started farming, there was a massive population explosion. The farming really revolutionized us as a human species and allowed us to kind of grow as a species because of that. And it's a big concept that you need to make sure you understand that in the Neolithic period, it's known and noted for its growth in agriculture, which had a huge population boom. Okay. Then we start to see the creations of towns and villages. And why do you think we start creating towns and villages at this time period? What has happened in the Neolithic period that would maybe cause us to kind of form as a community or as a group of people? And then what we're going to end you with is one of the major villages and kind of finding groups of that time period. So go ahead and look up the Catatayuk village, answer these questions, and then that's where we're going to stop. We're going to pick up with this in class tomorrow.